Confirm. I see the vehicle and the license plate. We have just found Kiely's vehicle. Over.
Authorities reveal the autopsy results of Kiely Rodni. Forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan comes on to discuss what happened to the 16-year-old who was found dead in her SUV. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
She was either hungover or just had a really rough day. She looked distressed.
When do you think that this took place? Parked his van right here, facing that direction. Her vehicle was parked right over here. I have set a radius of 10 miles around Prosser Creek Reservoir. We're going to work hard to clear Stampede, Independence, Boca, and Prosser Creek, all within that 10-mile range.
We want to focus right now on a major update in the case of Kiely Rodni. Now, we've talked about this tragic story on Sidebar before. This is the 16-year-old from California who was found dead in her submerged SUV on August 21st of this year. This was 15 days after she was reported missing. And she was actually discovered by the dive team Adventures with Purpose. We also had the opportunity to speak with them here on Sidebar as well. Her disappearance had garnered very much widespread attention across the country. Hundreds of volunteers scoured thousands of acres of California, and he actually moved into Nevada as well. The FBI got involved, and there was a thought that she was abducted, that there was foul play. Well, now the autopsy report has been, or I should say, not quite released, but at least revealed, or the findings of it have been revealed. And we want to talk about it. So I'm joined right now by forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan, who is also the host of the Body Bags podcast and one of my favorite people to talk to. Joseph, good to see you, and thanks for coming on.
Hey, no worries, buddy. Good to be with you.
Now, let's first start off. There hasn't been you haven't had a copy of the autopsy report, right? So we are kind of limited in what we can understand. But what authorities are saying is that the autopsy has revealed this to be accidental drowning. What was your reaction to that, and how do we know that?
Well, obviously there were findings at the autopsy that would have given them an indication that this young woman would have drowned. And just so that we understand, one of the things we look for at autopsy, particularly when we find bodies that are submerged, are going to be the weight of the lungs. There's a standard weight dependent upon the person's size. And for her, she's roughly 16 years of age, slightly built. And there's an expectation she's going to fall within certain ranges, and that is the weight of her lungs. This is something that's long established. So when you begin to get up into those higher estimates, that is one indicator regarding weighted lungs, where the lungs are heavily congested, and there's indication that she would have been in respiratory failure as a result of being in this aquatic environment. That's part of it. Now you can wind up drowning in any number of ways, and that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're drowned that it's an accidental death. However, there was not any other indication on the part of the ME to give them pause to think that this is anything other than an accidental death. And so listeners understand, we in the medical legal community go in with the working assumption that every death, and I mean every death, I don't care how benign it might appear on the surface, every death is a homicide until proven otherwise, because you can't unring the bell, to use, one of those lawyer terms you guys like to use. You can't unring it. You can't go back and get a do-over. So, they kind of tick the boxes relative to this, and that's what they came up with. I'm very, very curious to read the full autopsy report, though.
Let's get into this. So you said that there are not other outward signs to indicate foul play, that this was murder. I want to get into that because her body was bloated, it was livid, it was decomposing, so much so that it couldn't be identified due to the decomposition that was present on the face. Now, it's indicated that there were no signs of significant external or internal injuries. from a layperson's point of view, I'm thinking, well, if there is this level of decomposition and damage to the body, maybe there were injuries, but we just can't see it. Maybe she was harmed, but we can't see it. And am I totally off here?
No, absolutely not. And that's certainly something that we take into consideration. And you begin to kind of, when decomposition manifests, sometimes it can mask underlying injury, and you're right on target. We've been hanging out long enough together, obviously, Jesse. So that's part of it, and you have to be very careful. You're going to take. I'm not saying you're not careful in every single autopsy, but you have to take more care with a decomp autopsy, because things can have a tendency to be hidden from you. And in this case, they would have looked at. Let me see if I can explain this in kind of kinder terms. The body, there will be a certain amount of discoloration with the body as a result of decomposition. You have to be able to delineate between the postmortem changes relative to the antemortem event, or what's called a perimortem event, which kind of means in the throes of death. So what you would be looking for is to kind of suss out exactly whether any focal areas of hemorrhage. Is there any sign that her body, as a result of some kind of external injury, was reacting through hemorrhage? That's one of the things that you look for. And then you have to marry that up with what you know about decomposition. And it takes a keen eye to kind of be able to make your way through this and kind of understand it. I found it interesting what little I know about the case is that she was obviously unbelted, because she was essentially found in the rear of the vehicle, one shoe on, one shoe off.
Let's just jump into that for a second if we can, because so two of the SUV's windows were either down or broken, which is curious. And as you said, she was found in the rear cargo compartment of the SUV with her right leg against the pillar of the back seat and resting near the headrest. So now I'm wondering, again, A, foul play, or B, is this somebody who was trying to escape?
Yeah, and that gives you an indication of potential disorientation. One other point we have to make here is that the vehicle was inverted. So the vehicle is essentially either almost completely on its top or kind of listing toward that way. There's that grainy screen capture that's floating around the internet right now that they took. You can see the plate and that sort of thing. And the thing is, the vehicle is kind of dependent on the left upper side, and it's kind of hanging in there. She's in 14 feet of water, Jesse. And so there would be disorientation. Remember, this occurred at night. So there's not even, and at 14 feet, you're not going to have a lot of light down in there anyway, depending upon what the bottom is like. Is it muddy, murky, that sort of thing? Sometimes you go on dives, you can't see your hand in front of your face, depending upon the environment you're on. This is not the Caribbean, all right? So you're not going to be able to see real well. Can you imagine being, essentially diving or plunging in your vehicle into this cold water, which it was probably very cold. We're talking about in the area of Truckee, California, inverted, and then it's dark outside. You don't know, you can't even see your bubbles to see where they're going, if they're going up and that sort of thing as air is escaping. And, there's kind of a concussive event that occurs too. And I'd be really interested to know what her brain looked like internally, if there was any kind of indication of blunt force impact that would have been consistent with a car accident. You see that a lot. So you've got a lot going on here. And of course, there's the toxicology report as well.
So the coroner's division of the Nevada County Sheriff's Office is the one that ruled this death an accident. They indicated, the investigators, that they're still going to evaluate any additional information related to this investigation. They're going to work with the family on that. Have you ever, and look, I'm not trying to fuel speculation here whatsoever, but given the curious circumstances of this, I have to ask you, and we have about a minute and a half left. Have you ever seen a situation where there could be, a sheriff's office comes out and said, this is the initial autopsy findings, it's an accident. And then later on, they look at it and say, we were wrong. We did a reevaluation. This was not an accident. this was something else, or the family or someone else hires an independent autopsy and they determine it wasn't an accident. Given these kinds of circumstances, I guess the question I'm asking is this the end of the story truly, or is this just a part of it?
Well, it sounds like that the coroner's office has come to the conclusion that this is as it appears to them. How, in answer to your question, Jesse, yes, I have seen where they initially rule an accident, but generally it's not going to jump to something other as far as the manner of death other than undetermined, and that'll be like pending further investigation. I think probably the totality of the circumstances coupled with the toxicology report that indicated that she had THC on board. There's ethanol, which is essentially her alcohol content, which I think was 0.088, which is just over legal limit. But alcohol or ethanol is actually produced in the decomposition process. So it's kind of hard. And she had been down for a while. So it's kind of hard to kind of, separate those two. But we do know she had THC in her system. So was she impaired in her driving? I think that factored into it too as well, Jesse.
Yeah, because she was last seen at a party in the Tahoe National Forest area. Again, whatever the circumstances of this are, it is a complete tragedy, and you just wish this never would have happened. Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time, and I encourage everybody to listen to your podcast, Body Bags. And, you cover a number of different interesting subjects that we don't sometimes have the time to really focus on, and you do, and your perspective is always incredible. So, Joseph, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse.
And thanks, everybody, for joining us here on Sidebar. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.